This is Creating Your Encore Career and Becoming a Silver Entrepreneur with your host, Lynn Freest. Lynn will share ideas and expert advice from people that are walking in your shoes and living their encore careers, where they want and at the pace they want. You'll start a company of one with confidence and knowledge to live a fulfilled life of freedom and ease. Lynn is a coach and leadership consultant whose mission is to show senior leaders and experts how to start something refreshing and new after a full career in the corporate environment.
Welcome to this episode of Creating Your Encore Career and Becoming a Silver Entrepreneur. Thanks for listening. With an encore career, the rewards are better than a cold beer on a hot day. And you can be creating value in the world beyond just winning the next pickleball game. You can work when you want, where you want, and you can do the work you love. You can live the dream. So if you're ready to get started today, please contact me at lynn@lynnfreest.com. This is episode 177, and it's titled Creating a Portfolio Career with Sheila Wilkinson. I met Sheila in an entrepreneurial conference in October. Sheila has a lot of titles: attorney, social worker, coach, speaker, educator. She's known as the joyful lawyer because she loves what she does and who she helps. And I think you'll be interested in how she pursues different threads in her work. In other words, a portfolio career. So some of the things we're talking about today are her journey and how COVID allowed her to do a reset in what she was doing, how she helps clients dig deeply into both, see where they are today as well as where they want to go. She shares the concept of human design and how that fits into her work. And finally, she really talks in several areas about how she makes rest a priority. Well, welcome, Sheila. Great to have you with us, and we'd like to just jump right into it. And what are some of the things you're up to these days in terms of your business and the work you do with people?
Everything, all the things and none of the things. Yeah, it's been, I tell you, it's everybody. I'm finding a lot of people are like, oh, 2022 is finally over, as if 2023 is going to be any different, people. For me, I'm in a really good, like when we're recording this, it's the end of the semester. I'm about to post final grades. I'm very excited because I feel like this semester has been a beast, like a real beast. I think it's just the culmination of a couple of years of COVID and separation and changes and all of the things. But I'm super excited about just having some downtime and enjoying the time that I know that I've set aside for myself as a business owner and just really just sleeping. Am I allowed to say that? I'm, and it's not, but let's be clear. I get my sleep. Like last night I had 10 hours of sleep, right? Like I get my sleep, but also I'm really excited about more sleep. We'll talk about more sleep later on, but yeah, it's good times. It's good times now. There's definitely a time in my career early on where it was not good, but now I'm just like built my business the way I want, where I live my life and my business is around it. And so I'm just excited for every day. It's just kind of me. Yeah, I'm a pretty joyful person. So
you talk about this year, and I think of, I was on a webinar with some people a while back, and they said, we're trying to get used to actually meeting with people again.
Yes.
We're not used to actually being with people. And excuse me. And I think there's something to that. We've been in an artificial distance for a while now, and this was probably the first year where we really started seeing one another again.
Yes. And it's funny that you say that because one, I've always been that person who I'm like, what? There's something? Let's go do that thing. Like I've always been that like really excited person about all of the things. And I, in the last couple of years, I just like COVID, I think lots of people have different opinions, but I feel like for me, COVID was the best possible thing that could have happened. I haven't had COVID, don't want COVID, but I feel like the lockdown, the like slow down, okay, finally I can breathe because I have just been going and going and going and going and going and going for years. And it's all things that I love to do. And also, I really just wanted a break. But to the point of learning how to people again, like I'm the kind of person that will walk in a room. There's not a stranger, right? Like I walked up to you, we would just started talking. And we were like, as if we were old friends. And that I think has been really weird to get back into is I know how to people. I know how to walk up to strangers and have conversations about their shoes and their kids and in their cart, like in their grocery cart. But it's definitely been really interesting to start peopling again. So the event where you and I met back in October, it was the first time I'd been around that many people in 3 years, even before COVID, because I have friends who are in Brussels who have an AI company, and they had been like feeding their little, I don't know how like all of the AI stuff works, but like they'd been feeding data into their machines basically. And I was scheduled to go to Brussels. And I called them like mid-February, early February. I was like, okay, I'm about to buy my tickets. I just want to make sure you can pick me up from the airport, whatever. And they were like, no, they call me Shishi. No, Shishi. They have little ones. Like, no, Shishi, you can't come. And I'm like, ha, 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 very funny. I need to buy this ticket. If you can't pick me up, it's cool. I'll take the bus. And he was like, no, Shishi, you can't come. Something bad's coming. What you need to do right now is go to the grocery and like stock up 6 months worth of stuff. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This craziness. And then it happened, right? Because they were getting it in Europe before we even got it here. And so anyway, so yeah, this is one of these things. I live in a high risk household. And so it's difficult. I think sometimes I want to go back like balls to the wall and just like live life. And I'm also like, and also I don't want my partner to die. So, what is that balance? And I think that separation is really, I think that a lot of people realized, to your point, like I think that a lot of people realized that they really needed more time than they were giving themselves. And COVID gave them that time. And also we want to be around people, but only when it's right for us. And I think people felt really empowered to only do what felt right in the moment of feeling that it was right for them and not feeling like they have to say yes all the time. And I love that. That makes me really happy.
Great.
Yeah.
So maybe give us a little background and all. You work with several different groups of people. So let us kind of know who those folks are.
Sure. Oh boy. Okay. I'm just like thinking, okay, this is what happened when I first met a person in real life that I didn't know. After 2.5 years of COVID, they were like, what do you do? And I'm like, because I stopped having those kinds of conversations. So it was a little on the strange side. So anyway, I do a lot of stuff. Number one, I do whatever I feel like doing, which I think I love that. I definitely am done doing all the things that I thought that I was supposed to be doing in my life. And I also like helping people not do all the things that they thought that they were supposed to be doing in life. So there you go. There's my answer. I do that as a lawyer. I do that as a coach, as a business consultant. I do that as an educator. I do that as a facilitator, workshops, those sorts of things. For me, it's really about helping people figure out who they are and what they want so that they can actually make some like solid, aligned decisions about the direction that they want to go. I think this is where you and I are really aligned. Mm-hmm. And when I do that as an attorney, I do that as a coach, I do that as an educator. And it's been really interesting, especially the last couple of years of the transition from the go all the time to being able to have virtual conversations with literally anybody in the world and to be present for them and to really create that space for them. And it's been really interesting to see how people think that they're at that like certain point. Like, well, I'm at this point and I want to get to this other point. And so there's a point A and there's a point B, but I'm not really sure that you're actually at point A yet. And that always really surprises people. And I take that perspective into everything I do. It's not just only as a coach, right? It's as a lawyer, it's as an educator, it's as a facilitator. It's like you think that this is where you want to go, but is that actually where you want to go? Is that the right reason? Are you doing it for the right reasons? Are you, like you're at a point, but you're not necessarily at point A. And for me, what I really love is figuring all the yucky stuff that happens before point A, so we can figure out what point A is. Everything for me comes down to expectations. And having grown up in a very strict Catholic household, you did what you said, yes, ma'am, no, sir, and realizing how many people are really out there in the world who are having all these expectations of themselves and of others, and the ones that they think that other people have of them, which is really where like my favorite part. But is that really an expectation people have of you, and helping people sort through that, whatever that is. And sometimes it's business, and sometimes it's, students, and sometimes it's working with career professionals in their careers and those sorts of things. And I just like, whatever, I'm here to help you. I want to hold space. Like you can be this a safe space and let's just figure it out. Let's figure out what point A is for you. And then like help you make a plan or at least have some questions that you can ask yourself. And I was listening to your last episode about all these questions that you're going to ask yourself for 2023. And what I loved about it is that number one, I'm a lawyer, right? So I'm like, ask all the questions. I want to know all the information. That's a human design thing we'll talk about. But like the Socratic method of, but why, right? To really get as deep as you can about what that answer is so that you really get to the root of it. So yeah, and I think in large part, that's what I do is just help people to reflect on what's working, what's not working, and how they're going to change that.
That's wonderful, Sheila. And it brings to mind a guy I was introduced that had a book called The Portfolio Career. And that whole idea, that concept is fascinating to me, that you may have several different threads in your life moving forward. And so with my audience, the people that are trying to start that second act or whatever, that is fascinating, that it may not just be one act. It's kind of like they may have had a job, but moving forward, they can actually do multiple things like you've described here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and this is where I think where you and I are pretty aligned, because if you start talking about the journey of like how I got to where I am, I didn't just go, oh, I'm going to law school, I'm going to be a lawyer. Like that didn't happen. Like I had a wild and wacky life. My parents died when I was a kid. My dad died when I was 12, my mom when I was 16. I raised my sister. And so I started out in the service industry just like most people of my age did. And then I got a job in a transplant lab and I loved it. It's so funny because I never was like a science and math person. But then I got into it as a JOB because I was working on my master's in social work. This was pre-Katrina. I'm here in New Orleans, and right now I'm here in New Orleans. But I was like, okay, I want to go get my master's. Let me work at the university, and then I can get some tuition benefit and all of these things. And I worked in a transplant. Worked in a transplant lab where we were like doing cross matches for cadaver and live donors for organs and stuff. And I just think that's fascinating. And also then Katrina happened and then things changed. And then I went to law school. And I think thinking about these last couple of years, what I have seen the most, I think, working with clients and just catching up with people and meeting new people like you is that you don't have to just do one thing. You know, like I think that we've been told that we're supposed to choose. You're supposed to choose what are you going to do? What are you going to be when you grow up? I don't know. Happy? Joyful? I don't know. Not sleepy? I don't know. Yeah, I just think it's really interesting. And when I think about all of the places I've been and all the rooms that I've been in, and I started out in the legal field over 20 years ago and sitting on the floor of a law firm on the weekends, breaking down files, like literally taking paper clips and binder clips off of paper so the paper could be shredded, right? You start how you start. And then I looked around and was like, yeah, this is like chaos here. So I'm just going to tidy things up. And then I took over. And sometimes we find ourselves on the paths that we find ourselves just because it happened by happenstance. And then sometimes we find ourselves on those paths because we've chosen to be on that path. I don't know if it was either of those things for me. It was just sort of what happened. Like I saw things and I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. Let's do that. But I remember distinctly, I was 7 years old. A police officer asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, oh, I want to be a teacher. And he was like, that's good. We need good teachers. You're going to be a great teacher, because he'd seen some other stuff that was going on and how I was connecting with people. And everything I do is education and also have all of these other things. I don't know. It's just interesting to me.
Sure.
How we get on the paths that we get on.
Yeah, I've been influenced by a study done by Stanford talking about the new map of longevity, but they talk about we could easily have 80 years of adult life for people that are just being born today. So they would suggest that the possibility you may have not just 6 jobs, but 6 careers as you move through that life. So you really have to be open to the fact that, yeah, it's not going to be one thing. It's going to be multiple things.
And honestly, that it should. I think most of the lawyers, so just take lawyers, for example, right? So most of the lawyers that I know are repressed creatives. They're musicians, they're writers, they're artists, they're sculptors. There are all these creative spaces inside of them. And somebody told them that they can't make money doing that, or you can't make a living, which is, I'm out to change that. I feel like if you're a creative and you want to make money, talk to me, because I'm going to figure out we're going to make it happen. And it's because I know that was suppressed in me. And also we can be creative in lots of ways, right? And I think people who tend to be, and maybe you can speak to this from sort of your corporate experience as well. It seems to me that most people who end up in those jobs are really, they wanted something else, but somebody just told them along the way that they can't do that thing that they wanted to do. And then they just wait until they quote unquote retire to go do the thing that brings them joy. And I'm like, can we do that now? Why do we have to wait? Yeah, I don't know. Do you get that? Do you feel that a lot, like with people that you're working with?
And I ran into it in different ways in corporate life. Sometimes, for example, I was in manufacturing. So people in the factory floor, they came in, but they truly were just there to make a paycheck. And then you'd talk to them, you'd find out they're the church organist or they're running a youth softball league. And so all of a sudden you'd find that there's a whole nother arena that they're really finding joy in and making a difference. So I never discounted the fact that they were just there to pay the bills.
Of course. If you go into it knowing that, right?
Yeah. But that whole idea, I think, too, in the corporate world, you get assigned boxes. The corporate world tends to define jobs. And now I think it's changing because we should have a list of tasks or something like that. Because one, you found out in COVID that you could do things differently than we ever thought could be done. And then two, as more places have gone either global or remote in some fashion, all of a sudden now we're breaking down, quote, jobs into something smaller that people can do in a variety of ways. So I think there's, interestingly enough, a lot of opportunities coming up now.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I love that too. I think the boxes versus the list. Yeah, that's putting people in boxes, putting tasks and putting roles in, but all of the things. And it's interesting to me, like this whole like return to the office idea. You must be, as if you aren't able to do your job unless you're being seen, right? Or unless somebody can see you writing on a piece of paper, you must not be working. And obviously this is a much bigger conversation we could ever unfold here in the time that we have. And maybe that's a different episode, but just like the expectation that you're supposed to follow the rules and do the things, and that you're supposed to show up and be online and have your little Teams screen or whatever, your Slack color or whatever. I don't know. It's been very interesting. And for me, what I found, like, in this last couple of years is like the giving of permission, right? Like, and teaching people how to articulate what their expectations are so that they can then give themselves permission to do what they need to do for themselves. And it may be that you work that half day or whatever the situation is. And the articulation, I think, has been, people have now been able to slow down long enough that they can say, okay, how do I explain this? How do I say this? How do I create this? And generally speaking, I think most people think that they can't say it. But now people are like, oh, how can I say it? Oh, okay, this is great. I'm glad that you're actually asking the question, how can you say it? And not just stifling yourself for years and years until you get to the place where you enter retirement. And then you're like, now I get to do all the things that I want to do. And so to your point about the person who's there for the check, but they're doing all the things that bring them joy. Sometimes a job is a job, right? If that's your job and that's what pays the bills, the transplant lab. I loved it. I didn't think that I would love it, but it was a job and it got me what I needed, which was part tuition benefit so I could do my master's, right? Sometimes it's a means to an end. And if you go in and I think if you understand that, then that's fine. But when you get, especially with the kinds of people that I'm working with, I'm dealing with people who have these like master statuses of who they are. So they're no longer a person, they're a lawyer. They're no longer a person, they're a doctor. They're no longer a person, they're a whatever, name a title, accountant, right? And helping them like reconnect back to their humanhood, their personhood, and reconnecting that intellectual self to their emotional self, because there's a lot of separation of that. And we're taught to separate our emotional selves from our intellectual selves, and in college, from these professional schools. And it's been really interesting to me to see how disconnected people really are, and then helping them find joy in the thing that they think that they didn't find joy in anymore. Like they chose a career, they're burned out, they're broke, they're bored, right? This is what I find the most: burned out, broken, bored. And working with those people to help them find that joy again so that they can slide into that retirement. And I've worked with people who are about to retire and people that are in the middle of their careers. So it's not like it's just early career. I think it's the entirety of when I say career, traditional working age, right? Not necessarily that you've got a career, quote unquote.
I think that whole piece is very fascinating, that we have to find our own identity again. If it's been locked up in a title, just as I counsel people who are looking to start an encore career or be an entrepreneur, saying, to be honest, nobody cares about your title. And they care about how you can help them do what they need to do. So all of a sudden, just saying, hey, I'm a lawyer, or I'm a logistics expert, or I'm vice president of whatever, nobody cares. They need to know how you can solve their problem. And so all of a sudden people say, how do I even define what I'm good at? And you get back to that, what are the things you enjoy doing in life and stuff like that? And how can we make more of that?
Yeah. And also, is there something that you've always wanted to do, but you thought that you couldn't do because somebody told you couldn't? Just because, and this is where the expectations come in for me, right? So there's 4 types, right? Expectations we have of ourselves, expectations that we have of others that we've explicitly said we have of others, expectations that other people have explicitly said that they have of us, and then the expectations that we think that others have of us, which are assumptions, right? Which is where most people make decisions from that space, which is not. And so that's a whole nother conversation, but I want to do a workshop on how to make decisions, right? Let's just talk about making decisions and how we've been trained to make decisions and socialized to make decisions. And then let's figure out how to make better decisions for ourselves. And to your point of the choices that we've made and how we've gotten to this space, it's like you can change the thing that you're doing, and also you can be happy about the thing that you're doing now. Or if you want to change and you want to go do something else, that's okay too. But you have to first give yourself permission to do that. It sounds a lot easier than it actually is to give yourself permission, because everything you have is tied in, and you think, okay, and that's where that sort of survival, fight, flight, freeze steps in, and the fawning as well, because that's a 4th F for fawn, of like people pleasing, right? And so when people then start to see the narratives, they're like, oh, and there's just so many aha moments that I'm like, okay, right, we got some motivation here. Now what's next? And certainly for me, like in the last couple of years, especially, like I've learned that I need way more rest than I thought that I ever did. Being conditioned and socialized to be like a generator, right? This productive person, go. And I think the corporate world tells us like, we're nothing unless we have our billables. We're nothing unless we have our caseload. We're nothing unless we've shown up to work and proved that we've worked that day. Working doesn't require you to do anything too. Like for me, rest is productive. I don't like to put it in that category all the time, but I need it. Like I need the rest so I can show up with my clients. And I think I'm more successful when I do okay, I'm going to say it. I think I am the most successful when I do the least amount possible. Not that I'm like, I show up and that's my doing, right? As opposed to checking off the things on the boxes. And not everybody is like that. That's why I made the way I am. This idea of continuing to do something, even though we don't find joy in it, or we are bored, or we are broke, or we are, and broke doesn't have to necessarily mean financial, right? Some people are just, the system has cut them down. Yeah. It's been I've been doing this for 20 something years. So it's not like it's anything new, but I think the last couple of years with COVID have really just helped to see into the little nooks and the crannies in a way that people have always been afraid to show before.
Yeah. And I think what I found personally and what I've shared with others is another thing is once we had the job or whatever our career was, we had a very structured set of routines, things that we did each and every day. One of the things that I found when I retired at first was, boy, I could do anything. Since I didn't have any new routines, I didn't do much of anything.
Right.
I think that's also a piece where people have to acknowledge that I got to create some new habits, new routines, new ways to whatever I want to do. Even if I just want to be the best pickleball player, I need to find ways to go about that. I think there's a piece of that it's not all about willpower necessarily. It's also about how can you help yourself? What are the structures you can put in place?
Well, in the corporate world, or when we have a job, someone else is telling us what to do. Someone else is putting the structure in place. And if you just, so every Monday, if you just keep going, I'm going to go back to the Monday thing in a second, but if you just keep going and letting life happen to you. And this is the thing, like we know this intellectually. That's not the problem. We could read all the things, we could read all the books and we're like, yeah, of course. Yes, of course. This is true. Yes, of course. I'm just letting my life happen to me. But something, and that's where I think for me is this like disconnect of the intellectual from the emotional, is I want people to reconnect those things, because if you don't reconnect them, then what you're trying to work towards is not going to really truly happen the way you want it to. And so on Mondays, I hang out on Instagram. I'm an Instagram girl. I never thought I would say that out loud, but here it is. And so on Mondays, I always put up a health intention for the week. It's okay, but these are your facets of health: physical, mental, emotional, intellectual. Sometimes I put spiritual, sometimes I put community, sometimes I just put overall relationship. And so I kind of vary that last one. But like this week, it was overall, right? And then what is your intention for this? Like, what are you focusing on this week? And then the next thing is, okay, now what are you going to do to support that? Is it sleep? Is it sustenance? Is it sports? Is it SEX? And it doesn't have to be SEX like SEX, right? But like the sleep is the rest, is the sports is the movement, the sustenance is the nutrition and the hydration and the things that you're taking in every single day. And even just a little tiny thing like that helps, that intention can help you to start create that new routine. So that way, when you are in those shifts and you are making those changes, it just feels more natural, I think, than to like go against the thing that you've been doing for 20, 30 years or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, too, it's helpful when people I often ask people to go through and list the things that gave them energy or joy or where they found flow, whether it be at work or anything else, to see what are those other hidden talents there. But then it gets to, especially the workplace, where been focused activities is what is important. When in fact, it's probably thinking is where we give our most value. In their studies of high performance artists or athletes, they often only quote work 4 hours a day, but it's disciplined work when they do it. And they're creating huge value in whatever they do. But it's in the business world, it's more an activity-based measure. And you really, especially as you want to move from, in the second half of life, you want to move from, I'll say, success to significance. I think you have to focus more on these things. Where are you adding the most value, not just where are you adding the most activity?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like I said, I feel like I'm better. I'm more successful when I do the least amount, right? Not because I can't do it. And to the point of the sports, like it's about that focus time. Mm-hmm. So for me, I would much rather be resting, take my rest, do what I need to do. And then in 4 hours, I can knock out 12 hours of what would normally take somebody 12 hours of work. I can knock out in 4. It's because I'm rested. I've got my nutrition, my hydration, like I've done my movement with the sports or the swimming or the yoga or whatever for the day. And I'm taking care of my relationships and myself, right? And when that happens, then I'm able to be quote unquote more productive. So if somebody values productivity in that way, then often the first thing I do is like, hey, I need you to slow down. And they're like, no, I got to go faster. I'm like, please, let's not. And to your point too, about looking for these hidden talents, the question I love to ask is, if you so let's say you're just going home from work or whatever, you running errands, whatever, you stop and you get some gas, you pump in the gas, you look over and you see the lottery sign, right? The little toot there in the corner of your eye. And you're like, oh man, I wish I could win the lottery. You go in, you buy a ticket, you come back out. And then you go home, you do your thing, whatever. A couple of days later, you're like, I bought that lottery ticket. Let's check the winnings. And then you discover you've won $37 million. What are you going to do with your time? Not what are you going to do with the money? We all know what we do with the money. We would pay off debt. We'd give it a blah, blah. But what do you do with your time? And it's the same. I think it's aligned in that same way of, okay, you've worked really hard your whole life in this career and this title and this like space, this corporate space, like you're saying, Elin. Like, now what? What do you do with your time once that space and these things that were taking it up, that you were allowing to take up your time and your energy and all of your stuff and your talent? What does that look like now? And then once people get to that space, I'm just like, okay, now why can't you do that now? And then they come up with all the reasons why they can't. I'm like, okay, expectation. And then we can really start to get to the deep of it. And I feel like people don't allow themselves to start thinking about these things until they're ready to have that encore career and until they're ready to have retirements. This is what I've committed to. Therefore, I must be miserable. Says who?
Right.
Says who? I think it's really interesting to me. It's just like humanity. Just like I did my undergrad in sociology. And so for me, like sociology with the social work, with the lawyer, Lord help everybody. Like, it's just like systems and how things work together and patterns. And I want to get deep in it. And I mentioned earlier about the human design piece. For those people, I don't know, do you talk about human design a lot?
I haven't yet.
No.
It's an interesting concept, though.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, so human design is we'll call it a system. It's a paradigm, a tool that helps you. I use it in a way to help people and to help me reflect on when I feel a certain feel, annoyance, aggravation, frustration, whatever. Bitterness is mine. When I feel that, it's okay, what's happening here? Am I holding on to something that's not good for me? Am I pretending to be certain? Am I trying to attract attention? Do I know when enough is enough? Is this really enough? And I'm just continuing anyway? Am I trying to be free of the pressure? Like I'm just saying yes to just say yes to get you off my back? Am I thinking about things that don't matter? And so with human design, I use this for myself, but I also use it. And this is something that I've learned about in the last few years. And now I'm using it with my clients. This idea of we're designed to be a certain way. And we have a personality that is this external, how we show up in the world. And then we have this internal of how we're actually designed to be. And that often people maybe it might be easier to say, like your inner child, right? Like when your inner child's like, yeah, I don't want to do that thing. But your outer adult's like, yeah, of course we'll do that. And you're like, why did I do that? That whole idea of how they connect and then how we show up in our world and how we show up in our careers and how we show up in our relationships and our lives and our businesses in that way. And I really love it because what it's done is help me to learn how to tune in and to ask myself the questions. To the point of your last episode, I don't know where I'm going to fall in all of the episodes. It's 174 about what questions you're asking yourself for 2023 to ask, but not just to ask, but to listen. I think some people are like, what do I want to do? Well, I want to do blah, blah. That's never going to happen. So I'll just wait till I retire or I'll just wait until whatever. And I use it as a tool to help people get to the space where they want to be sooner than later, that they don't have to wait. And this just understanding how our energy works, and not to get super woo on y'all, right? But like, when you're tired, why don't you go lay down? And a lot of the creating routines that I'm working with professionals and entrepreneurs is, do you feel tired? Yeah. Okay, maybe we shouldn't meet right now. Maybe you could just have this 90 minutes and go sleep. And they're like, what? I'm like, I'm not going to charge. Like, we're just push this. Like, you seem tired to me. Why don't you go lay down and take a nap? And they're like, okay. And then we just push their appointment back. And I think the showing up for ourselves is as important as it is as showing up for others. But this corporate world teaches us that we're just supposed to be a butt in a seat that's productive. And that's not how we're meant. That's not how we're meant to live. We're not designed. It's not, when you start thinking about like thousands of years ago, people weren't like, oh, I'm going to go be productive today. They're like, how do I eat? How do I get shelter? That's it. That's all they were worried about. And you start getting to Maslow's hierarchy of needs and stuff. But I don't know. I just think it's really interesting. It's just I could just keep going. So I'm just going to stop. But I just think it's really interesting.
Yeah, a couple things occurred. One, the phrase I've often heard is, we have to remember we're human beings and not human doings. And that activity trap.
Maps.
Then the other piece about, I guess, knowing yourself, I believe she's a decluttering expert, Marie Kondo. But she says, does this thing give me joy? And I've thought of that in terms of, when I ask people, what are the things you're doing, what you want to do? And then I follow up with, does this give you joy? Or there are things we have, as my cousin who was a farmer said, some days you bring in the harvest, some days you clean out the barn. There are things we have to do, but that doesn't have to be the whole day, nor how we approach it. So I think there's a whole piece around, we have the agency to reframe things, even if we can't change them.
Yes. And learning how to work inside of it, right? Like, for me, like a lot of what I'm doing is helping, like, helping these people in these professions figure out how to work within it in a way that still brings them joy, that still gets them rested, that still gets them their sustenance that they need in the sports and the SEX, all of those things, because that's what's going to help you show up to be the person you want to be in your career. That's going to help you show up to be that person in your job. And also, that's okay. If that's what you're doing and this is your choice, great. But also, you don't have to be sad while you're doing it. What do we need to do to help you have some joy and not feel like, and I guess if you go in to your point earlier, a person working on the floor at the factory, whatever, like if you know that it's your job and that's you only go in and that's it, and you walk away and you go do that joyful thing outside and that's it. If you get, that's fine. But most people aren't like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people who work in the corporate world are not like that. I think that because they take on that title as if it's a symbol of who they are and their value and worth in the world. And to the point of human design, that's one of the things, that's one of the sort of, they call them not self themes, these not self questions. Am I trying to prove myself? Okay, if so, that's probably not a good thing for you to do. So let's figure out how to not do that. And I think these ideas, it's really interesting to me because these are the ideas I've always had about how we should show up in the world. I just didn't know that there was a paradigm out there, a tool that I could use to make that happen. And so when I found that, I was like, yes, I felt so validated. And look, you can have lots of joy. I was running that law office. I built it into a multi-million-dollar law firm. We were doing major class actions, multi-district, complex litigation. I was in the 9/11 litigation. Like, when I tell you I had a lot of joy doing that, I also had an incredible amount of joy January 21st, 2010, when I walked out the door, right? The joy doesn't stay. And I think about this like idea of like motivation and discipline, and like people think like the joy of like the thing that motivates you and also the discipline to continue. But if you don't feel the joy anymore,
Yep.
you don't have to keep doing it.
Yeah, and I think it's that idea. There are seasons in life, seasons when we enjoy one thing, but then there are times. I remember one of the guys that helped create LinkedIn said you don't want to think of jobs. You want to think of more tours of duty. And actually, I saw that in the corporate space. You had project teams, but if they lasted more than 3 years, they lost their energy, lost their effectiveness. I think there's this whole idea of you're most effective when you can do something with some intensity for a few years, maybe, but then, it's time to move on.
Yeah, it becomes that sunk cost fallacy, right? Like people believe that, put all this time and energy and talent in, therefore I must keep doing it. No, let me dissuade you from, can we just not? It's okay. You put in a lot of time and energy and talent. You learned a lot of things. You got a great skills. You met a lot of great people, and now you can leave, right? Like I had a 5-year plan. In 2008, I made a 5-year plan. I said, I'm going to be in Europe full-time or mostly full-time by 2013, right? 5-year plan. Guess what happened in 2013? I was in Europe full-time. I was in Brussels. I was in an advanced law program, getting another degree because I'm an investigator. I'm a one-line. I want all the information. Give it to me. I want it all. This is why you have to stop me if I go too long, Lynn. It's just because I love this, right? I want to know. I want to know, not because I need to know, but because I want to know, right? Because I recognize that sort of my gift is like taking all of my experiences, all of my stuff, all my knowledge, and then turning it back into something practical that another person can then use and make their life more joyful and their life better. And having this 5-year plan, I was still working at this firm. I was in law school. I did all this before I was even in law school, running this law firm, right? Like sometimes we just find ourselves on these paths, right? Sometimes it's happenstance, sometimes it's on purpose. And then I finally was like, okay, it's going to happen. And the year Katrina, 2005, Hurricane Katrina, my sister and I graduated on the same day. She graduated from high school. I graduated from my master's program on the same day at just about the same time. That was fun. And that moment was like, okay, then Katrina happened. And then I realized like, oh, I can do whatever I want. Because I'd spent my whole life into my 20s, well into my 20s, doing the things that I thought that I was supposed to do or that I'd promised other people that I would do. And then just making a different decision when like saying no sunk cost fallacy. Just because I put time and energy and talent in doesn't mean that I can't change or do the thing I've always wanted to do, which is what you're helping people do. Figure that out.
I always remind myself, been slowly reading a biography on Benjamin Franklin. It's always
He's
fascinated me
amazing.
because he had all kinds, two families, all kinds of careers. He did what the next thing was that intrigued him. And so for me, it's the perfect, and then his final encore career was as a diplomat. Okay.
Yes.
How did you get there? But that whole idea of, I think we have more opportunity in today's world to reinvent ourselves than we ever had before, whether it be technology or other things that allow us. So those are the things that I think create great possibility for us. And like you said, the first piece is knowing yourself. So whether it be human design or however you describe that gets to be a pretty important piece of, before you can reinvent yourself, you have to know yourself.
Well, that's the point A, right? So you think you're at that point A, but then there's all this stuff. There's all this stuff, this yucky stuff. You're like, I don't want to go down that road, but you have to, because if the next thing you choose is just another thing, you don't actually know whether that's the right thing for you, or if you're doing that thing because you think that you should, or it would be fun. It's not to say that you can't experiment and do those things, but also why not just make the right direction decision in the first place? And that what happens before point A. I think that's, and you have to be able to understand how the expectations are attached to those things. I have a handful of groups that I run with clients. I have what I call the co-op. It's like for business owners who are mostly solopreneurs, right? And who want time to work on their business, not in it, because we know we have lots of working in. That's never a problem. But they're working on the business to make the business what they actually want it to be, so that they can have that life that they intended to have. And we're talking about expectations with those people too. It's just like I would be talking about I have a quarterly group that I do with my clients, all kinds of clients, where we really just focus on them and come together and help each other create that space for each other. And what does that look like? But it's all about expectations. It's all about what you think you like. Where do you hear them? Where do you see them? And then how can we reframe that? How can we create something from this and learn something from it in a way that's going to help you to be a better person? I have 2 goals every day, Lynn. I have 1, to make a stranger laugh. So hopefully I've made somebody laugh today. And 2, to be a better person today than I was yesterday. And so that requires me to constantly have this like daily reflection piece, and human design helps me to be reflective in that way. But also it helps me to show up and to help other people be reflective about what the thing is that really brings them joy, or what do they really want to do in their lives and their businesses and their careers and stuff. So it's good stuff. It's really
Sounds
good.
great.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, sign me up all the time.
Well, Sheila, I sure want to thank you for sharing all your wisdom and knowledge here and your great insights. So I really appreciate that. We'll include your contact information. Any other things you'd like to share with people that you're up to or want them to know about?
Yeah, I guess a couple things. One, I'm pretty easy to find, but SheilaWilkinson.com, obviously. I do have a podcast, which Lynn, you are going to be on, so listeners, you come and listen to Lynn. So my podcast is What Would Sheila Say? You can find it on all the major podcast platforms. So it's about helping people, business owners, entrepreneurial spirits, create a joyful life that works for them, not one that they think that they're supposed to build. And like I said, I mostly hang out on Instagram. You can follow me over at Sheila M. Wilkinson. And if somebody's listening today and it's so easy, she just makes it sound so easy about setting expectations. It can be. And so I realized after many years of working with people that really a lot of what I was doing was writing scripts, like helping people articulate the thing that they really needed from other people, but in a non-confrontational, jerky way. And so I created like this pack of scripts to help people, like it's just like copy and paste, fill in the blank kind of stuff for better boundaries, like to create those better boundaries, to create those, to reset expectations, and to really help people go on vacation and enjoy their vacation, and also have some lead time when they come back from vacation, and not feel like the day I get back, I must be productive. No, you do not have to be. And just to help people reset those expectations for themselves and with others. That is also on my website as well, SheilaWilkinson.com. And you just click on scripts, and then they'll be there and you can check them out. So yeah, all of those things and more. There's too many things to add, but we'll stop now.
Thank you again, Sheila. And you're truly pursuing a portfolio career. I appreciate that. And again, thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was really lovely. It's really lovely. It's always lovely to see you.
Good to see you. So just a quick recap. Sheila shared with us how her personal journey and actually how COVID allowed her to do a reset on that journey, how she helps her clients go deep and also see where they're at and where they want to go, this idea of human design and how that fits in. And then finally, and maybe most importantly, why she makes rest a priority. We'll also have Sheila's contact info in the show notes so that you can reach out to her. So with an Encore career, the rewards are great. You can work when you want, where you want, and you can do the work you love. If you're ready to get started today, please contact me at lynn@lynnfrias.com or head over to lynnfrias.com, listen to a few podcasts, and get on the email list. So we'll see you soon. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.